tonight we're going to talk about Answer to Job. There it is, Answer to Job. There's another book, which is the cheat sheet to Answer to Job, which is very helpful. And that's Transformations of the God Image by Edward Edinger. And so what he's done in this book is he's gone through every paragraph of Answer to Job and talked about what it really means. It's tough going, actually, but it sort of follows on to the two Edinger lectures. So have you read those entirely now?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, they're
Immensely for all that transcribing.
yeah. Jung actually begins this book by saying, "I grieve for you, brother, who is about to read this work." I grieve for you, brother, who is about to read this book. And he says, Jung is challenging because if you read this, you have to admit that you're annoyed somehow. Because no matter who you are, no matter what faith tradition you've been brought up in, he's basically challenging that faith tradition. And it's actually from this that Edinger takes the 4 steps of the encounter with the greater personality that was in the lecture. But basically, what Jung is saying, and he said he fought with himself for 40 years about this because he knew that he was going to get eviscerated from the left and from the right for writing it. Okay, on the scientific side, the scientists want to have everything provable. Okay, they want physical facts, data, etc. And on the religious side, the theologians want faith. And he's saying, well, neither one is right. And in terms of his own lifetime, immediately after he published this book, he got crap from everyone. and at one period in his career, he started a correspondence with this priest named Victor White. He was a very eminent theologian. And so he started to correspond with Jung, and they got on through correspondence. And after a while, Victor White started to come to Bollingen to visit with Jung in his vacations, and they'd spend weeks together. Then Victor White ended up going to California for something. I don't remember what, but he ended up staying there. Jung published Answer to Job, and he was so critical of Answer to Job. He wrote this long review, condemning so on. and so the correspondence between Victor White and Jung, which takes only 23 pages, I think, but it's quite interesting to see.
It's in this book?
It's not in this book, no. It's in, well, many of the letters are in the collected letters, but there is, and I think I have it, so if I have it, I'll put it in the Dropbox. I think there's a 23-page, comprehensive list of the letters in order that you can read and understand, because it's really good. And as you see in Answer to Job, if you got near the end of it, you start to see that Jung started to be persuaded that some of the things in the Catholic faith are good, and this is coming from a man who was the son of a Protestant Reformed pastor, okay, and whose father had lost his faith. That was the key thing about Jung, right? And so really his whole life he was wrestling with this issue about what the God image is. And I wrestled with that my whole life too. And so anyway, before I mean, I have a 5-page lecture here, which I also put in the Dropbox as a cheat sheet, but probably not in time for everybody to see. So before I give all the secrets away, what are your first reactions? Have you looked at it recently, Dennis?
Just so you guys know, I picked up online, that's a 50th anniversary paper on an answer to Job Revisited. And it's a nice summary.
And
Yeah.
where was it?
Jung on the Problem of Evil. It's out of the Philemon Foundation, preparing for complex works of C.J. Jung, Harris.
Wow.
C.J. Jung page.
Okay. I think I'd like to see that before you go so that I
Yeah.
can get the connection to it.
Anyhow, there's a nice summary, so you don't have to go.
Right.
But,
Okay, well, you being the newbie, we should make you go first.
yeah. What's speaking to me now, because I had to read this stuff years ago, and it's been years since I've done my own dream work and Jung stuff, all that. This, first of all, an answer to Job is a staple for chaplains. Every chaplain ever had to read it.
Really?
Because if you're a chaplain, you have to wrestle with the problem of evil. Why does good God?
Why does God do evil things, right?
Yeah, or is God capable of evil? And all the questions that people go through because they're in crisis, and you go through crisis. Right. The other thing, and I'm kind of accepting of both evil and good, and there's a whole history of that. But the thing I got out of this, which I think is so relevant right now, is Jung's view of Yahweh as narcissistic, which is, I have some sense of the historical Hebrew scriptures, and I have a sense of the meaning of Yahweh in a certain historical context. And so, in some ways, Jung, I thought, projected some of his own narcissism onto the concept of Yahweh.
Did you have any thoughts before we really begin here?
I guess what I want to do is, I've read Job from a literature standpoint in school way back when, and then I read it as a Christian standpoint, and going through, explanatory notes and things, and going through each thing. I would like to sit and actually do a comparison between the two, because some points I felt I could see where he's coming from with the angle he's taken, but I also think it's a slant.
It's a what?
A slant. It's his slant.
Yeah, it is a kind of slant, surely.
Because some things he interpreted.
Well, it's a psychological
Interpretation, right.
It's a psychological perspective, right? And mind you, in whatever I say tonight, I'm not throwing stones at any faith tradition, at least not intentionally, because I believe that all of them have merit. Okay, and when I started to follow Buddhism, I found that it made me a better Christian, right? Among other things. But now studying Jung, it makes me a better Christian and a Buddhist. So, and a Hindu and a Muslim, actually. Okay, because I see the same things happening in Islam. Have seen, so anyway, we'll get into it further. But I mean, around this table, I imagine we'll be fairly convivial. But out there, I don't know. Go ahead.
Well, it's been a while since I've read it. I don't have I told you last week about the dream I had. I was like 18 years old, asleep, and I get this dream, and it says Surah 22 or sort of 21. And I went, what? And it went S-U-R-A, you know, in my dream. And I went, okay. So later on, I went to the library and looked that up. It was Islam. But it was about prophets. And now that I look back on it, it just said there were all these prophets, you know, and so they all brought forth their own idea of what religion was. I wasn't connected to any religion. When they asked me at school, you know, because they wanted you, I was in the prep school, we need to know what your religion is so we can get you to the right church. And I said, I have no preference. And they were reeled back. You know, they called my parents immediately and they said, yes, that's true. So, and my main motivation was I wanted to date girls at all these different churches. I didn't want to be stuck in one place.
Let's just cut to the short strokes, right? Shall we cut to the chase?
I was already dating this girl, and she was Catholic, so I wanted to go there. So that worked out. And so I still don't have any. I'm not hinged on, I'm not hooked into any of them.
Right.
I thought this was good. It was a good psychological foray into the psychology. I've been kind of looking at that stuff for a good 20 years or so, and I had already read this before years ago. So I read it not too long ago, but I was just looking at it as psychology. I don't care about the. To me, well, I told you a few weeks ago. I said most religions to me are just the worship of male consciousness. So,
fair enough. By the way, did you see the Grammys last night?
No.
The worship of the goddess. I mean, you have to go on YouTube and look up Beyonce's number from last night on the Grammys. Oh my God! I mean, this was pure goddess archetype. You know that
I want to look at that.
she's like 6 months pregnant with twins.
I saw some images. Yeah.
Right, and
That's cool.
the whole way that they presented this from a dramatic point of view, with all these women around her, and then she's in this big thing with the crown and the sun. Oh my God, you have to look at Beyonce.
Well, I saw
Just as an archetypal example, right? But what you definitely have to do is look at the Beyonce just to see the goddess
sure.
archetype.
Yeah, I saw images. I just couldn't.
Well,
I
that's
didn't have
making
time
its
to
way
do it.
into Christianity, isn't it?
The goddess?
Liberal wing of Christianity.
Absolutely, that's part of the answer to Job.
I think so.
So anyway, John, your turn.
Well, I was just amused and intrigued with his depiction of Yahweh as unconscious, and how he creates so much trouble because he's unconscious.
Well, I mean, consciousness has to exist in the universe, right? I mean, this is Jung's point, that Yahweh, until a creature is created that has consciousness, nobody knows that Yahweh is great. Okay, without consciousness, you're no big deal, you know. As Esther Harding said, it's just a lot of, birthing and dying and murdering and eating in the swamps, right? Without consciousness, right? And so,
Sort of what you're saying is why I always saw as layering. You've got that, you've got the Yahweh thing, and then you've got the consciousness thing. And the consciousness, it's sort of like, as above, so below, that sort of thing.
mm-hmm.
There's, it's like we think of our physical bodies and everything around us as being life forms and what it's all about, but it's that consciousness that actually is sort of layered on top of that kind of is a world in and of itself. And just the way you're talking about consciousness fits
Well,
that.
and as we think of consciousness, I mean, there's no other consciousness in the universe that we know of right now. There probably is, but so far as we can reach and see, as
So
far
we've
as we
sort
know.
of inserted ourselves up into it, just like you can go through the layers and do that. It's
Right, but
we get glimpses, and then die.
So Master should not be looking for life. He should be looking for consciousness.
Consciousness, good
Right.
point.
Sure.
Because it's silly.
Well, if you
What
ask
was
me,
the
there's
movie
no
with
difference. There's no
Jodie
difference.
Foster?
Oh, I was just watching it
Okay.
before I came over
What
here.
was that?
Contact.
Contact.
Yeah.
Which is really, that's the question of contact.
Right.
Yeah, are we really into investigating
Wh-
the universe? But really, it's a journey into conscious.
Right.
Yes.
Well,
And-
see, I see no difference, and I decided that a long time ago. Life and consciousness are the same thing. You can
Right.
just call it two
And-
different
and
words.
it-
Unconsciousness is
Unconsciousness
Lost track.
is death or the realm of, before life.
Yeah. Well,
It's Yahweh, sorry.
right. Well, I mean, the irony of Contact, the movie Contact, is that it was based on a novel written by Carl Sagan. Okay, and so Carl Sagan is positing this psychological experience that Jodie Foster has, and yet in his last book, he was totally dissing anything that was demons or anything in the mists of time, anything mystical, and yet his novel was based on something mystical happening. Really incredible.
Are you saying the novel was metaphysical?
It was metaphysical. I mean, because at the end of it,
That's why I think a novel is psychological will be much more interesting.
right, because at the end of that novel, or at the end of the story, Jodie Foster is trying to convince the congressional committee that what happened, and the committee member says, "You mean you wanted us to take it on faith?" Right? Because she had an 18-hour experience, but everybody else saw something that happened in a 20% of a second, a 0.2 of a second, right?
Yeah, there's that whole thing of faith and knowing. So.
Knowing and faith, right? And that's the Scyllans Charybdis that she has to go through, but also we all have to go through, because that's the fundamental thing of Jungian psychology, right? Which is you have to live in that middle realm,
yeah.
right? You have to live in the middle
In the
realm.
in-between space. It's mine.
Not in pure science where everything is provable, and not in pure metaphysics either.